Arkansas. I have a very, very special guest with me today. I have Mark McKellar. He and his wife Melanie are owners of Backyard Bird Centers in Kansas City, and he is also a biologist. So, Mark, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your birding journey.
Oh, all right. Well, um, way back, my inspiration, of course, was through Boy Scouts when I was really young, and when I went to wildlife school, in North Carolina State University, and in the early '80s, I always thought I was going to be a fish biologist because I was really into fishing when I was in high school. And well, I met a guy, and between my junior and senior year in college, whose parents were big bird watchers, and so he just infected me. We would be paired up because he was an Eagle Scout too, and that kind of thing. And so, as I say, it just went click. And I fell in love with birds, and I never pursued fish jobs. So I started studying birds, and of course, bird watching is a hobby, and so it's been my life. And so all the jobs I pursued, I did research on bobwhite quail and different birds, and working my way up. And then I ended up I found that my true love was teaching, so I went to go into the nature center world. I became a nature center manager, and I ran a couple of different nature centers in Kansas City, and that's where the jobs took me. And that we've been out here now for 33 years, and we had Melanie, my wife's job, kind of moved us around, but we ended up back. We wanted to be back in Kansas City, and so we did. And when we came back here, there were no nature centers to run, so we decided to buy the Backyard Bird Center. And all the time, I've been leading bird expeditions around the country and bird hikes locally and breeding bird surveys in Missouri here. And like I said, it's just been my life and my passion. So the store opened up whole new avenues of being able to educate people. As I say, I teach every day because there's always somebody coming in wanting to know, well, how do I attract hummingbirds, or how do I attract cardinals, or how do I keep squirrels out of my feeder. So I teach every day, and that keeps me happy. And then Facebook is where my journey started. I know, like yours, and doing live programs on there. And then I transitioned into YouTube, and now Mark's Backyard Birds YouTube channel has really taken off. And we're very proud of what's going on, and being able to spread the word about our fine feathered friends.
And it really has taken off. I've been following you, I would say, probably for a year and a half. And one of the things that I really enjoy about your lives and also your recordings is that you explain it easily for the backyard birder. It's not too technical. Also, you provide very tips that are very valuable. One of them, as I sit here, is looking at the number of bird baths that I see here in my yard. I
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
water
no, we're
feature here, which I have turned off right now so it wouldn't be too loud. I have one of the things I learned from you that I think really advanced my bird watching experience was how important it is to have water. I didn't have very many birds. I added a bird bath and bam, it became a bird sanctuary.
yeah. My viewers they jokingly call me Captain Water because I. I can't I don't know how many of I don't know 400 videos, and I would get you a high percentage of my videos contains a message about water in them because I'm so passionate about it. Food, water, and shelter, the basis of life. And for years, when I've done my garden club programs and Kiwanis clubs and all those kind of uh, groups, and I always talk about food, water, and shelter, and I say, well, what's the most important? And what's the most overlooked, and they both are water. And you know, eh, unfrozen water in winter, and during the hot dry summers, water is so critical for them. And then moving water for attracting them, and I know that fountain right there serves a great as a great magnet for, especially for migrating birds, because they don't know where water is. They're migrating at night. They fall out of the sky in the morning. They immediately need to find water. They immediately need to find food. and that gurgling, bubbling, cascading water sound is a magnet to them. And they're
It really is, and from what I understand, the birds can hear it from really high up. Do you know
oh yeah.
how is it a mile or is that too many?
I I don't know the exact distance, but I know it's a long way. And also, their eyes are so sensitive, and they're looking for the shimmer and the movement of water, the surface water too. I mean, that's how they survive. You know, they can go a good while without food, but they can't go very long without water. So you know, it is key. And I know you've seen on my videos where I talk about in winter. I'm going to turn this off real quick. Hold on. Didn't realize my emails on the yeah, in winter especially. Now you guys didn't get down your way or and not quite as harsh as we are up here, but from us north, more birds will die of dehydration than starvation. So
Yes.
they've got to find water, and you're doing the exact right thing, providing multiple sources. You're providing moving water, and even the little hummers. I mean, you know, they don't have the ability to bathe in any kind of deep water. But you know, when you're providing a misters for them to fly through, or the shallow little pools and that cascading, they'll find those little shallow areas. They get in there and splash around.
Yes, and one of the things I also do, when it gets really, really hot is I put a mister out for them,
Yes, and
and they love that.
I tell people, you know, even if you don't buy a mister, you don't have a mister on your water hose, just if you're going to water, you know, your any of your yard, make sure that that sprinkler hits some bushes and shrubs, because those
Oh,
birds, they will just sit in those bushes and let that water drip off on them, you know, underneath the leaves and things from where your sprinklers are hitting, and that's a huge help.
that's a really good idea. I'm thinking about planting some maybe some elephant ears because I've heard that they do like to drink off leaves, and
Mhm.
in some cases they can even take a little bath if the
That's
leaf's
right.
just right.
Well, they
So
don't
that
weigh anything, so they're not going to weigh
right.
down the leaf, that's for sure.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about hummingbirds. We are out in the bird garden right now, and I have a couple of hummingbird feeders up. I do have more, but for this particular live stream, I wanted to have them concentrate on these two feeders. But
Okay.
generally, I have maybe five or so, and they're not usually so close together. But we do live stream here 24/7 on YouTube. So they're in close proximity because I want everybody to see these beautiful birds. So
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about hummingbirds. Share with folks what is so amazing about hummingbirds and a little bit about them. So let's say you're a person and you know nothing about hummingbirds. What
Right.
would you share with them?
Well, you know, first off, what hummingbirds I think do we have is so people come in and they say, "Oh, I've got three different kind of hummingbirds here in my yard in Kansas City." I had one lady told me the other day in the mountains of North Carolina, she had five different kinds of hummingbirds. Well,
Oh,
that yeah, that's not the case. But it's really confusing because hummingbirds vary in size, just like humans, and vary in size from adult, you know, different size adults and everything else. And also, you know, color patterns, things like that are confusing people. But so really, if you live from the front range of the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean, you probably only have ruby-throated hummingbirds. You certainly only have ruby-throated hummingbirds that are nesting. Now, you live
mhm.
down in central to South Texas. Yes, you have another species down there, the buff-bellied hummingbird, and in winter, we get a few birds that winter in the southeast, especially southern Florida, like rufus. But the Rockies West, or where you can, you know, they have 11 to 13 species of hummingbirds out there. And so separating them depending on where you live. But remember, in the East Coast, you've just got the ruby-throated hummingbirds, and they're incredibly fascinating structures. I mean, their ability to fly is what make them so unique. Most birds, you know, flap their wings up and down, and whenever they're flapping down, that creates lift, and the shape of their wings, and it allows them to get push whenever they're flying forward. Well, hummingbirds don't flap their wings up and down. They literally flap their wings in a figure eight, the pattern, and so they're creating lift no matter which way they're flying. They can even fly upside down. They can fly backwards. Hummingbird, they're amazing flying machines, and they're fascinating. And of course, to do this, they have to have extremely good respiratory systems and cardiovascular system because they're pumping blood like crazy. These birds, their heart rates are so high, and their metabolism is so high, they would starve to death while they were sleeping, just because their heart rates would be so high. They didn't eat before sunrise, they would die. So to keep that from happening, they've evolved what is called a state of torpor, and that is whenever they land on and they're where their spot for the night, and their feet lock around the limb. That's a whole other lesson, but they can't fall off the limb because their tendons lock those toes around that when they're sitting on them, and they go into what a mini hibernation at night called torpor. And so they slow their heart rates down so they won't starve to death. And then when they wake up in the morning, then they go out and start feeding again, and they have to feed. We're getting a lot of calls with with migration going on about people getting hummingbirds in their house or hummingbirds in their garages, and we walk people through that. And what happens is they want to go high, and they're up around windows and things like that, and you people are trying to catch them. There's no reason to do that. What's going to happen is that bird's going to start running out of energy really fast, and it's got to feed. So use that to your advantage. Open up your garage door, open up a door in your kitchen, wherever the hummingbird had gotten into, and hang your hummingbird feeder in the doorway or just outside the door, and he's going to go to that feeder because he's starving after being in there for a little while, and then they'll just fly on out. And I've had that at least 2 or 3 times already this fall that that's worked for them. So
Well,
their
that
hunger
is
is, yep.
I'm sorry, that is a great tip. I actually would never have thought about that. So, that's a great tip.
Yeah, your instincts are to catch it. Run around. I tell a story of in college. I worked in a grocery store, and we had one running, and we were chasing it all over the grocery store trying to get it. And finally, it ended up over on the pop aisle, and it was going up to the Coke bottles, the red label on the Coke bottles, and it was trying to
Oh,
feel it in. And finally, it just sat on the shelf. It was exhausted. I walked over and picked it up, took it outside, and we had flowers because it was spring, and I took it out there and let it go in the flowers, and that bird started immediately going to all the flowers we had out on the sidewalk. So yeah, they're going to run out of gas, that's for sure.
they do expend a lot of energy. How fast do the wings beat? I can't remember. I
God,
mean, the wings flap per second.
yeah, is it 900? It's crazy. When I go to try to remember it, it's the heart rate and the wing beats are the ones
Right.
that I get confused when. It's ridiculous
I
how.
I do too,
Yeah.
but the heart rate is also extremely high,
Yes,
and so they
absolutely.
need the nectar to help them with their usage of the energy that they have.
And
Is
and
that
it's so
right?
funny that we talk about how they chase each other around, and well, one of the things we talk about is they never went to kindergarten, so they didn't learn to share. So they're battling all the time around the feeders. Well, those are primarily the adult birds, and you got two different types of fighting going on in the spring. A lot of it's, of course, courtship and mating because it's only adults. Well, now in the fall, you got all the babies, and this is. I don't know if I was referred to the little crabs and in Finding Nemo movie where they're going mine, 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 and that's what they're doing right now because they're trying to fatten up for that journey south because they have to double their body weight, actually more than double their body weight, in some cases, to make the next leg of their journey. When they usually fly about 100 miles a day or night, and so they'll burn up so much energy, and not to mention that jump across the Gulf of Mexico, it is incredibly stressful for them. So when they find a good food source like your hummingbird feeders, they're going to defend them. They go, I want this. This is mine, mine. And so young birds who just hatched this year, they don't know what's going on. So they come up to the feeder, and the adults chase them away, and they're like, what? And then finally the adult males leave, and then the adult females leave, and what's left are the young birds. And all of a sudden you see three and four on the same feeder feeding, which is pretty uncommon during the nesting season. It was rare, depending on where you live. But then, of course, they get to, and finally their bodies start tugging them. Their instincts, the day length changes, shortens, so they know it's time to go. Wind blows out of the north, and boom, they're all gone until next tax day.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit more about migration here in a little bit because I
Yep.
do have a couple of questions for you, and I think migration is just a fascinating subject when it comes to birds. But share with us a little bit about the life cycle of a hummingbird.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, with spring migration, when they're coming back north, they arrive in Kansas City about tax day. We always tell people to look for them around tax day. Down your way, probably 1st of April, I would think, when you start to see them. And the first thing that happens is the males set up a territory, and usually they it's going to be on your feeder or on a good flower garden or some a good multiple sources for food. And the females come in, a week or so after them, and the females come to feed on the feeder, and the male chases them away, and she comes back and he chases her away. Now this is courtship, mainly what this is. And hummingbirds have a mating system called resource defense polygyny. And I know that's a really big word, but what it means is he finds a food resource and defends it. And then he courts with her. He does his little flying dance for her when she's around in your yard. And then she mates with him and he lets her feed. And then she goes over and goes out and builds a nest, lays the eggs, raises the babies, it fledges the babies. The male does nothing. The male only is the mate attraction and the mating and defends that food. And then a one male ruby throat can have up to nine females in a harem around your yard. It just
Really?
depends on. Oh yes, yeah. And it depends on like in the Ozarks in Missouri, they're just they females like to nest around streams, and so like in the Ozarks, there's tons of little streams down there, and so there's a lot more hummingbirds there are in Kansas City because we were a prairie, so we never had a lot of hummingbirds because we didn't have that many trees historically. We have more trees now than we've ever had, and so for a harem in our area, maybe two or three females. Whereas down in the Ozarks, it can be nine. I mean, uh, and it's funny to watch those females gang up on him. One will come in to feed, and he'll chase her off, and three more females will come behind him and drink, drink, drink until he gets back, and then they team up on him and run him back and forth. But the female does all the incubation. She does all the feeding of the babies. And yes, they are tiny, tiny nests, and they're made of spider webs and lichen. And they once those babies fledge, which again depends on latitude where you're at. They immediately start feeding. She eats a lot of insects during the nesting, and she has to feed those babies insects, and not just sugar water and nectar from flowers. Small insects are important because that's their source of calcium. And the keratin is like our fingernails, is what insect ectoskeletons are made of. And so she has to feed a lot of insects to those young growing babies so their bones can grow healthy and their feathers can grow healthy. So there is that misconception that they only drink nectar. They definitely eat like fruit flies and small insects that size is what you're thinking of when you want to feed hummingbird feeding. So, and then again, then and we're in the part where we are now, where they're trying to survive, and like all wild animals, most baby animals die in the first couple of months of their life because they don't know anything. They're stupid, and they run into things and all that. But if like hummingbirds and other animals, if they can survive and learn some valuable skills during those first few months of life, then they can live to 3 or 4 years old, maybe five. It's a hard life. Like I say, when a metabolism that high and everything, it's a hard life. So they don't have long lives, that's for sure.
I've noticed one thing about this year that I did a little bit differently is I put some flowers in close proximity of the hummingbird feeders, and so they visit both, and it's fun to watch. They just spend some time at the flowers, and then they'll spend some time at the feeders, and it's fascinating to watch them at all, but I mean to especially watch them eating nectar from a flower is just, I don't know, it's just something really special, isn't it?
and natural. Yeah, I mean, this is
And natural.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, absolutely,
Right.
and we tell you, like, when people are have never attracted them before, and when they come in, like, "Oh, I'd love to try. How do I do it?" And we talk, hummingbird feeders, uh, but the more red and orange color you can offer, the better. And so we always encourage hanging baskets and potted plants in the spring when nothing else is really blooming. And if you can get some of those going early, and then we also recommend the red bow trick, and that is red or orange Christmas bows, present bow, and putting those up near your hummingbird feeder. And that color is what attracts the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are attracted to red and orange because it's been proven that bees don't like the nectar. They don't often nectar on red or orange flowers. They prefer all the other colors. And so hummingbirds know that those red or orange flowers are more likely to have nectar. And of course, they like tubular shaped flowers, and as their bill indicates. So they'll come up to those bows on your wall outside, and they'll just go up to it like a flower, and they say, "Oh no, this has no nectar," and they go in and find your hummingbird feeder. Then you can take those bows down. But what the trick is to get them to discover your feeding.
That's a really good idea. I never thought to do that with the hummingbirds, but I do put up orange ribbons and everything orange I can find for the orioles
For the Orioles,
when
yeah.
they come through. But that's a good idea. And one thing that's interesting that I heard, and you can share with me if this is true or not, but I believe that I read that hummingbirds come back to the same spot.
They
And is that true?
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is true of a lot most birds, and we don't even know how they really do it. I mean, it obviously a lot of instinctual things that go on in wild animals that we don't fully understand. But yes, I mean, birds that migrate, it's amazing how they find the same uh, bush that they nested in last year, or the same hummingbird feeder that they nectared off last year. And of course, they get there, and if there's another territory and they get chased away, then they go out and seek another one. But yeah, and just like the juncos that come in the fall, they come to the same backyard year after year after year, and they go to the same probably 50-foot circle of ground on their nesting grounds up in the Arctic Circle. So it's crazy how birds of migration and their ability to find the same locations work.
It's so fascinating, and I really enjoy, as I mentioned before, reading about migration. Back to let's see, I had a quick question. Oh, let's go ahead and if you could share with people about placement of hummingbird feeders and also what to put in the hummingbird feeders and how important it is to make sure that your feeders are clean.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first off, most people go, "Well, I've heard that it's a 4-to-1 mixture, 4 parts water to 1 part sugar," which is right on, spot on. Never use anything but just pure, just regular sugar. Table sugar. Don't use powdered sugar. Don't use honey. Don't use brown sugar. Don't use artificial sweeteners. No, just use regular sugar. That bag of sugar at your grocery store. And some people boil their water. I've never boiled my water. I use hot tap water, and just something to get the sugar crystals to break down, and you can keep it in the refrigerator up to 2 weeks. But when you'll want to, you don't want to put too much in your hummingbird feeders because, especially early, because they're not going to be coming a lot yet, and you're going to be throwing a lot of it away because that nectar, that sugar water. I tell people, remember, you're making clear Kool Aid is what you're doing. And so, would you take your pitcher of Kool Aid you made for your family and set it out on your deck railing in the hot sun, and then go out there every day, or expect your kids to go out there and pour them a glass and drink out of it? Well, that's what you're asking your hummingbirds to do. So we recommend, of course, that you change that nectar every 2 to 5 days. In the summer months, 2 days at the max when it's really hot. In the spring, you can get by with it longer because the temperatures are cooler, but make sure you maintain it. Well, the temptation a lot of people have is to, oh, but I like mine sweet, so I make mine 3-to-1. You know, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, the North American Hummingbird Society, and all science says don't do that. It says 4 parts sugar to 1 part, 4 parts water to 1 part sugar is the correct mixture. And what I understand from my research is that a sweeter mixture increases the hummingbird's need for water, and most people aren't as diligent as you are, Dana, with your water offerings, but they have to seek out water. And so they expend more energy because that sugar mixture is too sweet. So, keeping it clean is key. And there's different kinds of hummingbird feeders. I like one. To me, the best hummingbird feeders are the ones that are easiest to clean because most people get pretty lazy about that, especially if the hummingbird feeding is slow and they're tempted to leave it out there. They don't want to change it as often. And that's why people ask, when should I take my hummingbird feeders down in the fall? There's always late birds, there's always early birds. Click that off of there. Sorry. The it, if as long as you're willing to keep your hummingbird clean is my answer to fall when to take your hummingbird feeders down, because there's always going to be stragglers migrating through late, and if your feeders up, that can be a big difference, especially in really cool weather. We've had birds stay around till Thanksgiving some years up here, and people even put heat lamps on their hummingbird feeder to keep it open so that these late birds can drink from it. But typically, for us, it ends about the end of September. And we'll get a few reports in early October and even into mid-October. But yeah, I say if you're not going to clean your hummingbird feeder regularly, if you're getting tired of doing it, just take it down. The hummingbirds will be fine without your hummingbird feeder, especially if you've planted well and you've got some flowers for them to nectar on.
That's right, and it's better, like you said, if you're not going to maintain them, keep them clean, refill, all of that, then just take them down
Yep.
because you sure don't want, the mold and things to grow and it to be bad for the hummingbirds, and honestly, like you said as well, they'll be fine when you go on vacation. I'll see people on Facebook absolutely panicking because
Yep.
they're going on vacation. Oh, my poor hummingbirds are no, there's plenty other things for them to eat.
Yeah. The hummingbird feeders are far more for our enjoyment than they are for their survival. You said vacation. One of my videos I did years ago was what I do with my hummingbird feeders while I'm on vacation, and I recommend just emptying them and clean them up, and then hang them back out empty while you're gone. And when that hummingbird comes by and sticks their tongue down there, and they'll think, "Oh, this flower has no nectar," and he moves on, and he'll keep checking it. And when you
Oh.
you know, and that's easier and much safer than leaving it out and letting it go bad while you're gone.
Well, that's a great tip. I did not know that, so I'm gonna definitely have to try that next time. It's just really hard, many times with summer, everyone's so busy or going on vacation,
That's right.
and plus the additional, heat from the sun, you're just not able to maintain it as you need to, like, daily, especially when the weather is, like, 100 degrees plus or whatever.
Yep.
Um I had one other question. Oh, can you share a little bit about, the placement of the hummingbird
Oh,
feeders?
yeah, that's a concern of a lot of people, and they're mostly worried about their proximity to other feeders that bring in bigger birds. So they're worried that the hummingbirds won't visit it. Believe me, hummingbirds aren't afraid of any other birds. They are the ultimate flying machines, and they know that they can outfly other birds. And so I've had mine hanging, on poles that have a finch feeder and a peanut feeder and a multi all on the same pole, and the hummingbirds come right in there and feed and feed and feed. Now, uh, you know, just to give them confidence, and also because of, like you brought out, the sun, it's not a bad idea to have them so that they at least get partial shade, or there's a scape cover. Like I watch mine on at our place now. There's a big locust tree right off the deck, and I watch them go from those feeders. They'll feed, 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 and they'll go up, and I watch them go up and sit a limb, and that's so he can protect those feeders and run other hummingbirds off of it. And also closest to cover is important, but maybe not as important as maybe with other songbirds. But hummingbirds, that may help. But wide open yards, I've seen them feeding. And just it's not as big a deal as it does to maybe some other birds, hummingbirds, just because they're such skilled flyers.
Explain some of the, or share with us some of the behavior you're seeing at the hummingbird feeders now.
Yeah,
What have you
yeah, right.
noticed?
Yeah, right now, my for us right now, our feeders are starting to slow down. We peaked about a week ago, maybe even it's whenever our numbers were really big and just the air wars going on, chasing each other around, and now the you're not getting we're not seeing that kind of competition for the feeders right now. So we know we're getting the northern birds are still coming through. We still have that, and that's going to go on for a little while. But we just the biggest activity of all our resident birds and those early migrants has passed now. But we're seeing really I it's funny to watch. Fun to watch the interaction. I think I hate it whenever bees take over a hummingbird feeder. Well, the one I have right now, the camera feeder, the bees are on it, but they're not on the flowers. They're around the seam in it. It must leak a little bit there, so that's where and the hummingbirds come in, and they really aren't bothered by the bees. Bees really don't pose much danger to birds. I mean, wasps could possibly be a little dangerous, but even studies show that they really rarely kill a hummingbird or sting a hummingbird. It can happen, but it just doesn't happen as much as people fear that it does. But yeah, they're coming in and they're feeding. They getting water, sitting up in trees, guarding. They're just fattening it up. They're just trying to pack on the calories. And then when that wind shifts out of the north, remember a tiny bird that weighs about a paper clip in your hand can't fly against the wind. So it's waiting for north wind to change. It's this time of year. We've had last week, we had a wonderfully cool week here, but we lost a lot of hummingbirds that week because every night the wind was blowing from the north, and during the day those birds take advantage of that and start moving south. So that's what we're seeing a lot right
They are fascinating to watch. I just had a sparrow. I don't know if you can see it. I don't want to move, but it just landed close to the water feature. It may
now.
be just out of camera range. But it's a pretty brave little guy to come up here with me sitting right here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yep,
the hummingbirds are, I can always tell when the hummingbirds have been here before because, or at least I think I can. Okay. Let me
yeah.
turn
I know
this.
what you're saying. Yep.
Um, because can you see him now
I
on
can't.
that little
I'm
piece of?
on the phone, but on the
Oh,
phone, and I
okay.
can't. The screen's very small, so I can't
Okay,
see.
well, there's a sparrow sitting right there on the piece of driftwood, but what I like about the hummingbirds or what I enjoy about the hummingbirds is I can always tell which ones have been here before because they don't have a problem with me sitting out here doing like what I'm doing right now. Whereas
Right.
the ones that haven't been here before are a little bit more timid and won't get close when I'm sitting because right now I'm within close proximity of the feeders and I even have I got a hat that my friend Dave made, a hummingbird hat, and
Yeah.
tried it out last week. It has like 3 little ports, and it didn't take but 50 seconds for a hummingbird to come eat out of those little ports in my hat, and
I believe it.
it was so much fun. It was just so much fun to see them up close like that.
You're right. And in the spring, we always in 15 years, we in our old house we hung the feeder right outside the kitchen window. And every year in the spring, if I didn't have that feeder out, we'd look out there and there'd be a male hummingbird outside the window, right where that hummingbird feeder hangs every year, and he'd be hovering and like, "Where is it? Where is it?"
Yeah.
We know that bird had to have been there the year before, at least.
They're very fascinating. And another thing, I wanted to mention too that I've noticed is you'll see on Facebook, uh, people just panicking because somebody has their hummingbird feeder up, and they're like, "You need to bring it in because they won't migrate," and that's not true, am I correct?
You are correct.
They
Yes, this is
know
one
what
I've
to
been
do.
answering for 40 years. I can tell you. I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, no, they're bought and birds as a whole, not just hummingbirds, but hummingbirds certainly fall in this category. Is migration is triggered by the day length, little bit by weather, but really it's the length shortening of days. So that daylight shortening and gradually as it does, eventually those birds, their bodies start tugging them instinctively to go south. And I don't care how good a food source is, instincts tell them that there's not going to be a food source here a whole lot longer because freezing temperatures get in here, the flowers are gone, the insects are gone, and so I got to leave. Now, the young birds are the ones that don't know the routine yet because they've never done it. Well, even their bodies, they tend to linger a little longer than the adults, but then eventually their instincts take over and they head south. So no, actually,
They
keeping the feeder out actually can help late birds.
So back to migration, which is one of my favorite subjects. Let's talk a little bit about. I understand from what you said, the importance about them fattening up to get ready for the trip. But let's talk about the trip. Uh,
Okay.
Hummingbirds do not, contrary to what people may believe, some people may believe, hummingbirds do not fly in flocks.
No, no, they're very, and they actually, and most songbirds fly very high. Hummingbirds migrate very low, and a lot of most hummingbirds actually migrate during the day, whereas most songbirds migrate at night. Now that means for that journey, jump across in the spring when they come across the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the things that we've learned that's changed about hummingbirds in the last 40 years is now that with the invention of these little tracking devices, they can actually attach to a hummingbird and get their location off of cell towers and things like that, which is amazing technology. But we've learned that a whole lot more hummingbirds actually, when they're migrating south, when they get to the Gulf of Mexico, they don't go across; they go around the coast. They go down through Mexico to their wintering grounds and Costa Rica, Nicaragua, places like that. And but yeah, it's a fascinating topic and how they do it. And I just told the story recently again. I had to go on a radio show years ago because a guy was calling into this talk radio gardening show, and he swore that a buddy had shot a goose. And when he went to pick it up, there was a hummingbird clutching to the feathers of the back of the goose. This has
Uh-huh.
been around forever. Yeah, that's how they make it. They migrate on the backs of geese. No, that's there's many reasons why that's not true. I was like, well, the hummingbird wasn't smart enough to let go when the goose was falling to the okay. Well, no, that's not true. No, they do that, and they whenever their instincts hit and it's time the winds at their back, they'll take off, and they don't flock like geese and a lot of songbirds do.
So, my neighbor's mowing their lawn, so I just have time for maybe another question before it
Okay.
gets incredibly loud. But tell us about the Backyard Bird Center, and
Oh,
also share your social media channels and when your YouTube live is.
okay. Yeah. We opened the Backyard Bird Center and we bought a Backyard Bird store that was, the owner was retiring in 2002. And so we've had it ever since. So 23 years now, 23 anniversary. And it is in Kansas City in the Northland region. We're north of the Missouri River, up toward the airport is where our store is. And we've been growing for years. And we have a lot of dedicated customers and we're so thankful for them. We do and like I said, my love is education. So my wife's an accountant, thank God. That's the only way the store's made it. But I'm the biologist, I'm the educator. Run the retail part of it. But we're very lucky to have a great staff, and Carrie's our manager, and Ruth's been with me for God, since we moved to Missouri, 33 years. She was a volunteer. And then she followed me when we bought the store. And so we have a great staff, very knowledgeable staff about birds and can answer questions. The tagline I came up with when it first opened the store was come by and let's talk birds, and we really mean that. I mean, we felt like a business model that if we educate people and give them accurate biological facts and about bird feeding and bird nesting sites and things like we talk more people out of purple martin houses than we do into martin houses because we tell them the truth about them and how much work there is involved. Same thing about keeping the feeders clean and if you're not, again, we will openly tell people do not buy that if you're not going to maintain it, a hummingbird feeder, because we're about the birds. And so it's worked. It's been, like I said, I have a Lowe's at my back door and a Walmart at my back door.
You're so
That,
lucky.
yeah,
One
and the,
thing I want to mention too, it is a very easy find because you can be traveling north or south, and there it is right off the interstate. So whenever I go to Omaha to see my folks, I just dash off the interstate and spend some time. And I always have a question for you, don't I, Mark?
yeah, yes, yes, you do, and they're good
I save
questions.
them.
Yes,
I save my good questions, the fun. If you haven't been there, it's just a fun store. They have just a variety of things, and it's just like you walk in, it's like la heaven.
and I tell people, I told a lady yesterday was talking about how much she loved everything in the store, and I said, "Well, if you like what's in my store, we must be kindred spirits because I only carry what I like and what I believe in. I don't, I have never been one to just have a bunch of fluff. And I weed out hummingbird feeders, oriole feeders, all feeders that to me that are not practical and people are not going to maintain them because they're too hard, things like that. Over the years, we've quit carrying so many things. We've seen companies come and go, but the ones that we truly endorse are in my store, and we feel like that's a smart thing. And then YouTube just grew out of it. This is another avenue for education for me, and getting information out there. And I can't believe how successful that has been. And just like with you're a prime example of someone who found me through there. And I had a couple the other day, a couple weekends ago. They were traveling from Southern California to their daughter in St. Louis, and they were taking her some boxes. And they said we had to stop by and meet you. They're big YouTube fans. They're on and they follow me on there. And yes, they participate on the lives. And I have videos that come out every Monday night and every Thursday. But every other Thursday, every 2 weeks, I'm live on a different subject. Now, tomorrow night, right? Tomorrow night, I do every month. I do a monthly wild bird update. What's going on in the wild bird world? And tomorrow night is the September 25 wild bird update. And I do one of those a month, and then the lives can be, but the big part of the lives that, I always talk about, I have a topic that I want to talk about, but the greater part, try to at least have 20 minutes or more at the end for questions and answers. And those could go on till midnight. People are, people are starving for information. I love it. And
They really are, and that's one thing I like about your program is you're you're willing to answer those questions, and also you're very patient with people like me who just started really maybe a year and a half ago,
yeah.
and answering those questions and then helping me along my journey with your videos. And I do really appreciate that. Can you share your social media channel locations as well as share your website?
There you go. The YouTube channel is Mark's Backyard Birds on YouTube, and you start typing it, it'll pop up, and then like I said, you can go into the channel and search if you want to learn more about bluebirds. Just type in the word bluebird, and it'll bring up all my videos done about bluebirds, hummingbirds, right? And if you want to watch the lives, or you can look peruse through those, and most almost all my videos, maybe some of the older ones don't, but have chapters, so you can actually go down to the description below it and you read through the chapters and timestamps. You say, oh, he's talking about, do hummingbirds nest in houses? No. But, you can go to that part of the video and watch stuff like that. So it's, like I said, we're almost at 20,000 subscribers, and it's been very humbling. I never thought I'd see the day. And then the store, the original store website, and we still maintain it, is there's two ways to get to it. It's backyardbirdcenter.com, And then there's marksbackyardbirds.com now because that's grown so popular. So we've got a couple of those there.
And
Oh,
if you are in the Kansas City area, you also do walks.
yes,
You
third.
go birding.
Yes, we do. Yeah, I mean that keeps me sane. You know, I can't hardly make myself go bird watching anymore, except for the store hikes. Where I used to do it all the time, and the world's just crazy. And so, in the spring and the fall, so September and October, and April and May, we do bird hikes every Thursday morning at 8 o'clock to a different site around Kansas City. And that calendar, if you go to marksbackyardbirds.com or backyardbirdcenter.com and click on the calendar tab, it will have all my programs on there. And we do second Sundays at Smithville Lake, especially in migration for the waterfowl and gulls and things like that. This Sunday is the first one of the fall season, and then, so in the spring of all, the heat of the summer is just too difficult, and of course the dead of the winter weather's just too unpredictable and can be dangerous. So, and the birding's not as good. So spring and fall, that's when we do the bird hikes. And we do special ones too. We go up to Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge the Sunday after Thanksgiving every year, and we see anywhere from 50 to 300 bald eagles in a day up there.
Oh, I
Yeah,
may have
and
to look into doing that one.
yeah, that's a great trip, and just hundreds of thousands of snow geese and mallards and all kinds of duck species, and there's different hawks and sandhill cranes. If you live in this area and you've never done that, you really, really should experience at least once.
Well, thank you, Mark. This has been a pure pleasure. And I hope we can do this again sometime because this was fun.
Absolutely. Now, and I'm going to call upon the return favor. You offered a while back to come on one of my lives, and let's talk about journaling. And
Yeah,
I want to do that. I want to have you on and one of the lives coming up here in the next month or so.
I would absolutely love to do that. That is my one of my favorite things to do, and it's definitely fun to go look back at how the gardens and the bird garden here has evolved. And so I'm really looking forward to talking about that with your audience that you have there. And by the way, the audience that you have on YouTube, they're from all over. They're not just
Oh
from
gosh.
Kansas City. They're from other countries even. They you have quite a variety of people that really enjoy your channel. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for sharing your knowledge, and thank goodness you like education, because I know, at least for me, you have really helped make a difference in my bird watching experience. So thank you for taking the time today to visit with us, and we will see you again.
You're most welcome, and thank you, Dana, for the kind words and the support of what we do here and coming to the store. And it's always a pleasure to get to talk to you and learn get updates on Molly's Firehouse's garden.
Well, thank you so much. You take good care. Have a wonderful day and happy migration.
Absolutely.
Take care,
Take care,
Mark, and thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.